Welcome everyone to Forward Thinking, my new In Conversation TV series. I'm Associate Professor Art Phillips, and today's focus is the creative arts. We have a very special guest today, Jan Preston, world-renowned pianist, composer, songwriter, known in Australasia as the Queen of the Boogie piano, due to her mastery of the 1930s boogie-woogie piano style. Originally classically trained, Jan has released dozens of albums, mostly in the boogie-woogie and blues style. She also has a long list, a multitude of credits as a screen and score composer in feature films, television, advertising, and various multimedia platforms. Last year, Jan wrote and performed an album for my company, 101 Music Propriety Limited, a production music library, called Piano Bar Saloon. It was a great pleasure to work with her. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Without further ado, I'd like to have a very warm welcome to Jan Preston. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. This is really, really exciting. We've known each other for quite a while.
We have.
I don't know how many years, maybe 30.
Yeah, I think so. Since the Australian Guild of Screen Composers was first formed, and I think we met at one of their first meetings.
That's right, we did. That would have been probably late 80s. You were born and raised in New Zealand. Just talk about, when you actually sort of began tickling the keys, I suppose, so to speak, and your passion for what you do.
Look, my older sister and my older brother both played piano, and we were not a wealthy family, but my father, bless him, got a piano, and I just took to it straight away. From when I can remember being so little I could barely reach the keys, so I must have been 3, 4, maybe 5. And from then I just played, and I've almost played every day of my life since then. Studied classical art because that was what you could learn back in the late 50s in a remote South Island town in New Zealand. I mean, you learnt piano, you learnt classical. And I love classical music. I still play classical music for enjoyment at home. But my aunt, who had performed for silent movies, I remember as a child seeing her. She had a cigarette out the side of her mouth and played boogie-woogie and ragtime. And I wanted to play it, but I didn't know. Nobody could show you. She showed me a few things.
Okay, that's where it came from. Okay.
Yeah, but much, much later, I did a 5-year degree in classical piano. I did all the exams, and so I was a very dedicated classical pianist, and I have the classical technique.
Chops, which is probably how and why you're so fluent in all the different styles of the boogie-woogie, which we'll talk about all those styles later. Wow, okay, so when was the initial change, I suppose, from that early childhood and that learning into where you actually realized this is actually a career that I want to do? When did that actually happen for you?
Probably when I finished my 5-year university degree, conservatorium degree, which was a very strict, very narrow 5-year classical piano degree. Right. So I know how to finger Bach partitas. I know all sorts of stuff that I have never used in my career as such. But I also realised that I wanted to break out into other styles and that I couldn't earn a living. To earn one's living, as I'm sure you're aware, as a performing classical, particularly piano, which is a solo instrument. I mean, you can't even much get a job in an orchestra. It's almost impossible. You really have to be a teacher, and I didn't want to be a teacher. So I sort of had a big change and moved to Wellington in New Zealand and joined a theatre group. And actually Sam Neill was involved with us for a while, and he offered my first job on a film.
Oh, really? Okay.
When he was a director, documentary filmmaker, not an actor back then.
Okay, so this was back in New Zealand, yeah?
Back in New Zealand, right. In the early 70s. Right. So we had no idea that Sam had aspirations to be an actor.
Wow, okay.
And he worked for the New Zealand Film Unit. So that got me into composing and the theatre group because I was musical director. Had to keep coming up with things. We were very, very popular. We did cabaret shows. So that opened me out, but it was also earning. I was also earning. All I've ever wanted to do, and I think what most people really want to do, is be a working musician. I mean, a small percentage of people in the arts make a lot of money and are hugely successful, but it's a very small percentage. And I think that in itself is, quite an achievement in Australasia, in Australia and New Zealand.
Absolutely, anywhere in the world, but also especially here because it's a smaller territory, of course. How do you keep that focus, because some people have a big problem sort of juggling between the creative and the entrepreneurial sort of aspects. But I guess it's a day-to-day thing for you as well, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, what I would say to anybody coming up and trying to get a niche somehow, a boutique career, if you like, the first thing is keep going, one way or another.
Yeah, persevere, determination.
You have to just keep going because it's very easy in arts and entertainment to look into nothingness, to look into no work that you've either created yourself or you've been invited to do. So you have to try and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, be flexible, and also understand that often, and this was said to me by a guy years and years and years ago who managed Split Ends at the time and gave me a managerial advice. And he said to me, Jan, never forget there's an industry set up out there to say no to you. Because if they've said no, they've got rid of you. But if they say yes to you, they have to follow up. And it's often really and honestly not personal at all that you don't get the job, whatever it is. The other thing I would say very strongly in this frightening, heartbreaking, unregulated and very difficult industry, let's face it, arts and entertainment, is you are selling profile.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much of a creative genius you are at home in your own sitting room. If you think, and it's the same for so many industries, if you think you're selling food or you're selling your acting ability or you're selling your paintings or you're selling your music or your compositions or your songs, you are not. You are selling your profile. And if you have no profile, you have nothing to sell.
It's really all about business. And talent is super important. But without the business skill set, those people who are talented, unfortunately, fall by the wayside and they don't actually get to the point where they need to get. It is about profile and it's about marketing yourself, isn't it? And these are all the things that I've watched you do over the years, the 30 or 40 years that I've actually known you, And I've always said three things in my life. FDP stands for focus, determination, and perseverance, You keep that up no matter what, because you're going to have hurdles all the time. You end up, finding a path.
Well, it's sink or swim.
That's it.
Isn't it really?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't used to be good with the audience. I didn't know how to engage them. And you learn that, and if you don't, you won't have an audience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your audience. Everything that gives you your career, everything, or the people on that film that want to use you again, it's like somebody running a plumbing business or their own electrical or freelance cinematographer or whoever they are. It's repeat business.
Absolutely.
And if you can't get rebooked, you have no career, sadly.
It's so true. So being your own boss and being in control of your own career and your own destiny, that's an entrepreneur. So you have always been an entrepreneur in your life, It just happens to be in the creative arts. But it's all the same, isn't it? So being your own boss and the discipline involved with that and the awareness of all that and the focus of all that.
Well, I often think I could manage somebody else
I think
quite
you
well.
could.
If you're looking for a manager out. I've learnt these skills. I've had to learn these skills. I wanted to be a working musician, and I was prepared to do whatever it would take. And that is the entrepreneurial side of it.
Yeah.
To think, what have I got? What used to be called in the old days of record companies, your USP, your unique selling point.
Yes, that's right.
And this is the thing, you have to have a belief in yourself and total, what were the three things you said? Determination and perseverance and focus. You have to have that.
Yeah.
If you haven't got that, just don't even bother
Yeah. trying.
But you have to have that self-belief, and then you have to think, what is it? What have I got that 100 other piano players, probably better, and singers and composers or whatever else, songwriters, better than me, but what have I got that they haven't got, and how can I sell that aspect of who I am?
That's right. USP, yeah? Unique selling position, yeah. All of a sudden one day you got a phone call or an email from the UK, from the BBC, I believe, yeah?
I said to my sister, this never happens in the arts, and she said, well, Jan, it just did. I got an email through my website from a guy who said, my name's George Burton, I'm entertainment producer with the BBC in London. I thought, yeah, sure you are. And I'm ready to delete the email. But it turned out, in fact, he was. And we are using, because of course anybody can use any music that you've written, so long as they pay their copyright to inform APRA. Anyway, we are using your music. It's a blues piano instrumental called the Trout Blues, which I recorded as a kind of extra track on a record many, many years ago. I guess they heard it through Spotify. We are using this as the title music to our BBC London new show.
A radio show?
It's a radio show that I take it as sort of, it's like talkback and music and stuff, like ABC radio, local radio here. And anyway, they had it on air for about 3 or 4 months. And I think then they did a survey with their listeners. What do you think about theme music? And they got this overwhelmingly positive response.
Good for you.
To it. Oh, we love that piece of music. And extraordinarily, it's 2 minutes, 43 seconds long. And they play the whole thing.
Did they really? Well,
every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night.
For a theme, that's really quite unusual, yeah.
It is. I thought it'd be 10 or 20 seconds or 40 seconds, and they talk over the top of it. So it's very nice income stream and royalties, as you can imagine. But so this is what I'm saying about keep going.
Yeah.
You never know. You just, if you keep going and you've got something out there, if you're not out there, the point is you're not out there and somebody else is. So you're not propelling yourself and your profile forward.
Yeah. Opportunities are great, and of course there's hurdles and there's disappointments. You know, when this happens for you, I mean, it could be anything. I mean, it could be COVID. It could be, an injury. It could be, sort of anything that could actually happen, You're always aware of that, and you're always thinking, and you're always looking for, when a hurdle comes up, there's got to be a change that has to happen or something you have to do to overcome that.
Well, I think not having all your eggs in one basket. Because if all your eggs are in one basket and that basket is dropped, you have nothing. So I think freelancing, to have lots of connections, to be flexible, to work a 16-hour days sometimes because the following week you're not working at all.
Jan has done a lot of work for other people, very collaborative in terms of being a screen composer and actually writing for another project. And I love that part of it, as I know you do, because we actually help propel a story, as opposed to just a product that we write for our own sake. We actually write a product that actually suits to heighten the actual story. This is really what I wanted to talk about today was, you know, talk about your passion in the collaborative process and talk about how you work around a brief.
Well, the first thing I do is I listen and I think about it and I watch the film. And as far as I'm concerned, all roads lead to Rome, and that's the director. It's the director, it's their vision, pretty much, of all the projects I've worked on. And so I listen, and I've noticed that I've seen some composers working, younger composers, and you know, they're looking at the film, or they're looking at something on the computer. I have a notebook and I look at the director. So if you were my director and you were saying, this needs to be cold, calculating, troubling, blah, blah, or uplifting, or these words, I write it down. And then I enter the world of that film. That's what it comes down to. What we are doing as composers is a musical representation of the world of that film, somehow or other, however nebulous that is to try and represent. Now, we've all written screeds of music that did not end up on the film for the very reason, not that it wasn't great music, but it didn't work in the film. It didn't suit the film. It was reinforcing the wrong thing in the film, either in terms of the atmosphere or the story or the characters or whatever. So that's the trick with film composition.
Yeah. Do you believe that the best musical scores are the ones that you walk into a movie theater and you're taken away by the storyline, the script, and the film, and you're not even realizing what the music is, and you walk out and you say, well, you're humming the piece then, as opposed to realizing, oh, that's an amazing score during the film? I mean,
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's everything. It's music, sound effects, dialogue.
Yeah.
And film is an audio-visual medium. It is half audio and half visual.
Yeah.
And so the way those three things, sound effects, dialogue and music, work, and yeah, I mean, it's the film. I hate being aware of the music. Normally when I'm aware of the music, it's not working for me.
That's right, yeah. Because it is a journey. And I mean, I've always believed the exact same thing, is that, that's really what it's all about. I've always said, if you're a score composer, you are the accompanist for a Barbra Streisand. That's what you are. You are not the focus. It's not your spotlight, is it?
No, that's right, exactly. I mean, I've seen some horrific, sort of unbelievable scenes where on first meeting the composer's saying, oh, I don't know about that edit there. Hey, baby, it's their film,
That's exactly right.
I mean, you're there, you're a hired pen.
You'll confer occasionally with the director and you'll play things to the director as you go? How does that work for you?
Yeah, well, the first thing I do is I try and get a composition. Now, when I worked on the ABC's Dynasty series, which was just a horrendous schedule, as I'm sure you've done with TV series, where on the Thursday I watched the film, Thursday afternoon I rushed home and started composing. Friday they came and listened to the composition, and if it was anyway right, and we had this spotting session, and then over the weekend and Monday, it was crazy. I was doing sort of one a week, so pretty well in all of those, and there were 6 series of 8, so 48 programs. And some of it I think is my best music. It's sort of a blur. I hear it out and I go, oh, that sounds familiar. Oh, that's right, that's my music. But in all of those, I think there was one program where I had to pull a producer in on a Saturday and say to him, the executive producer, who was terrific to give the briefs, and I said, Tim, I just can't find anything that really works. And he said something to me and right, oh, okay, see you,
And a
bye.
click, yeah.
Just quickly, oh, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
But so I like to get the basic composition or compositions, and then it's all about theme and variation for me.
Yeah.
That's how I work.
It's important to have a template, I guess, or a group of type of instruments that you want to use, and an approach, a motif, of course, or a few different motifs, and you actually carry those through the whole program or the whole TV series. In the film, of course, that's what you do. But if it's a TV series, talk about that process compared to a film's process.
Well, the instrumentation is very important, because that sets the flavour, the bigness or smallness, the emotional. A cello's going to have a different emotion than a nose flute, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a symphony orchestra is going to be different from a piano quintet. So even when I'm composing right from the beginning, I'm thinking about the instrumentation. And then, of course, on a TV series, you almost end up with your own music library.
That's right.
Of it has to be the same.
Yep.
In some shape, manner or form. So yeah, you end up with a lot of just variations and adjustments of, you might bring something else in, but it would be wrong to suddenly stray too far from the plot, as if you've suddenly gone to a different TV series.
That's right.
So
yeah. I mean, it's a real art form, isn't it? And I mean, it's fantastic to do, and I can see your passion in actually doing it. I mean, I've heard your styles, and this album that you did for me was actually probably, each track was a different approach, honky tonk or blues or barrel house. How do you decipher what's what?
Well, they're all, I guess the oldest is the ragtime, and that's 1890s. I mean, that was in the 19th century.
Right.
Then after that came the boogie, and barrel house and those sorts of things, a sort of fast stride. They're fabulous styles of piano, and they're styles that are still popular in pockets around the world. Generally, if one is a piano player, professional piano player, you are probably a classical pianist or a jazz pianist.
Yeah, right, okay.
So it's quite unusual to be, I'm in the some of the jazz festivals, but a lot of the folk festivals and blues festivals in Australia, New Zealand and Europe, Germany. The boogie style is very, very big in Germany, of all places.
Is it? Yeah, okay.
Some of the best in the world. There was an explosion of it in the 1970s, and a lot of the early black boogie and blues players were still alive and were bought out. And to their credit, the Germans applauded them and bought them out and exposed them. And the Germans all know, they say, oh, you are the queen of the boogie-woogie in Australia.
Of the boogie-woogie.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful, I love all those, basically 1920s, 30s style.
Vibe,
However, I would hasten to add, Art, that this is 2024. I am a composer and I am a songwriter, and I want to, in fact, I've just finished a new record called Piano Land, and everything's been played and everything's been done. You've got the greatest piano players in the world from then till now.
Yes.
So you want to find your own take on it, your own. You play how you are. You compose how you are. Your music can only ever be an extension of yourself. So I hope that in playing the Piano Bar Saloon series that I've brought something a little different from what can be heard.
working with you on that project was actually really, really interesting for me because we actually sat together and actually worked out all the different possible styles in this genre that we actually wanted to achieve. The actual art form and the way that I actually watched you do it was really, really incredible. For you, the key was important. The tempo was meticulously important.
I have to say, Art, you were terrific to work with in that you gave me really good feedback. That was really helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Sometimes, no, it's not working, or I wouldn't go to the bridge twice. That needs to be shortened. Or how would you feel about speeding it up slightly? Yeah, great idea. Almost all of the direction that you gave me worked and was really helpful.
Oh, well, that's good. Thank you.
And I think of all the tunes, we dropped one. I think it was the first one I worked on, and I agreed. It was challenging project for me to just sit down and write, 10 tunes in the style of barrel house, ragtime, boogie,
Honky
blues, honky tonk.
You probably did this album within a month and a half, if I remember correctly. It was quite amazing, and the setup that you actually have in your studio worked well. It was mic'd really well. Jan, it's been just absolutely fantastic to have you here. Thank you for your time and sharing your expertise to both the creatives and the business world. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed Forward Thinking. Until the next time, all the best, and have a good evening.